Here we are. Perfect. Hi, everybody. Joe Moore here. Hope you're all doing great. Psychedelics today. We're joined by Dr. Kat. How are you?
I'm so good this morning.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. I warmed you up with some weird stories, and you had some
I
great suggestions for me.
I think that was
Um,
a mutual warming up, my friend. I love some
great.
in there too.
So you were a sex therapist out of Los Angeles. You've
Yeah.
been doing some CAP work with clients. Um, let's kind of give people an understanding of what you do right now, and then we're going to rewind the tape to kind of like give people an idea of how you got here.
Yeah. Okay. So, I would say I'm a professional shapeshifter,
Yeah.
meaning I do all kinds of things and shift into so many aspects of healing. So I'm a licensed psychotherapist and I work with sex therapy. I've been doing that for about 15 years, specializing in sexuality, trauma, relationships, alternative styles of relationships. I teach a combination of BDSM and Tantra, so I do workshops, retreats around that. I do ketamine assisted therapy retreats for women around sensuality. So we're doing CAP ceremonies, two of them. And then the whole rest of the retreat is based around the integration, coming into the body, coming into right relationship with pleasure in the body. And then I have a podcast, Sex Love Psychedelics, where I interview experts all on psychedelics, sexuality, relationships. And uh, right now we're delving into art as an expression to teach people, because especially right now, what I've been running up against is censorship, watching how words are not fully communicating or landing or being received. And I'm noticing how art can. So there's a way that art and the way that play can reach people and teach people in a way that you don't have to have these words that seem to be triggering or causing a block. So I've been an artist since I was a baby, like painting since I was 8, and now getting into more music and doing that as a way to get people to feel the erotic nature, activate, develop that relationship with our bodies and heal. Yeah.
So we were just chatting about our mutual friend, Dee Goldpaw, and
Yeah.
they were on last week, and we chatted about all sorts of things in the book. But I had Dee define erotic,
Yeah.
and you just brought the word up. Could you like what's a kind of functional definition that you like when you're working with people in this topic?
Yeah. So what I say with erotic is that it is the connection to vibrancy. It's the connection to life. It is the relationship that we have with the world and the experience of the world through our senses, and particularly as it relates to pleasure. So we experience the world through these data points, the senses, right? Sensuality is taking those senses in, but through the sense of pleasure, the enjoyment. And so when we're looking at, you might also hear the word eros, and eros is often used in Jungian psychology as a symbol for aliveness. And so we're looking for things that bring us liveliness, vibrancy, life force energy. Some people might hear it used in those terms.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I've been hearing people in kind of mystical spaces using the
Mm-hmm.
term, but clearly
Yeah.
not in like an explicit kind of human sex framework. They're kind of talking about it in that kind of like broader context.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah. And I think that's really important because we've we've attached such a narrow definition of sex as this act that we do. We bring bodies together or even our own body, and we connect to it through friction and positions. And that really limits the expansive experience of what this does as creation or life, or again, I'm going to use the word vibrancy, a wakefulness, right? And we are all sexual beings. You can't really segment that as much as we try to in culture. We say this is not sexual, or don't be a sexual person, or don't be sexually expressed. And yet we are sexual beings that walk this earth. It's how do we interact with everything around us that is erotic or can be erotic, because we can engage with things around us and it can also be very dead. It can be very, very numb. We can be very disconnected from it, or it can bring us down. And so that's not eroticism. That's like the opposite of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. The repression is so interesting. We kind of chatted about historical origins of the repression, but let's maybe put a pin in it for right now. and
Okay.
then talk about how did you get here? Like, so I assume you're an American, and the American experience is quite interesting and unique. And yeah, how do you like to tell your story?
Yeah. So I'm from Missouri. So I'm from rural town, Missouri. Grew up as a traditional Catholic family, and I had some childhood trauma from when I was younger, sexual trauma when I was younger, and leading into a lot of anxiety, depression, dissociation, panic attacks, eating disorders for about 11 years. But all of that was done in secret. So all of that was done within my own self and isolated from everyone else. So even though I was out in the world, nobody knew that I was doing these things or that these experiences were happening. And then I really struggled with relationships. They would last about 2 weeks, and then I would have full panic attack and end them. Or as things started to move towards sex, I would just shut it down and completely deadpan in a relationship. So there was a fascination while there was a fear at the same exact time. And it wasn't until I was 21 and I was reading a Red Book magazine, and they were quoting a sex therapist. And I was like, oh, that's a job you can have? Like, you can actually do that? And mind you, I hadn't had any sex. Like, the most I had done is like make out with everybody in the fraternity. But I was not moving beyond that because of the deep fear in my body. I went to California and got my doctorate in marriage and family therapy, and immediately dove into learning sex therapy.
Where did you
And
study?
Alliant University here in Irvine, or
Great.
in Irvine, yeah. And I, going into that, I dove into Tantra first, so studying sacred sexuality through more of the tantric lineage, and then studying more of the philosophical and the spiritual aspect of Tantra through yogic traditions. And then that was some of my first indications of how you could feel differently in your body. I was teaching yoga by the age of 19, 20. And I was like, oh, you can feel differently. That's interesting. There's a state change here. And so diving into that work, and then alongside, this more sexual, erotic side, and then the psychology side. And then I got into BDSM when I was 24 and realizing, well, having like a full transcendent experience that was similar to what I was trying to reach in the Tantra world, like deep states of surrender, altered states of consciousness, like activating different parts of myself, different characters in myself, different skills in myself. And then it just kind of progressed from there. I met a teacher who taught Reiki energy and introduced me to metaphysics. And then I got into, this whole different world of healing that was beyond just my traditional sense of in psychology school. And then I got into plant medicine, and it was just one thing after another. It's kind of like when the student's ready, the teacher comes, and it's here's a new piece. Here's a new piece. I have no idea where I'm going with all of this. I'm interested. This looks really cool. Let's do this. And then in retrospect, seeing how all of these things interrelate with one another. And now I'm in a place where I can see the interweavings of so many different disciplines, and see why some work, why don't, and then even the expanded definitions of things you see regurgitated in the spiritual community, things like pleasure, things like eroticism, things like surrender. Like, those are actually very complex concepts that we hear on social media or we see spoken on stage, and we're like, we nod our heads. We're like, yeah, yeah, that's right, because I've heard that before. But people don't actually understand what they're talking about with that. So is it actually deeply ingrained? So I've been able to see across these disciplines what it actually means.
When did things like ketamine assisted psychotherapy or MAPS come on your radar as something you were curious about?
I think I was 26. I had met somebody in the MAPS world who had introduced to me about things like MDMA therapy and telling me about the benefits of using that for sexual trauma. And I was like, oh, I'm really intrigued, being a therapist and having sexual trauma myself. And I had worked with somebody and did MDMA therapy, not through MAPS, but this is is separate, and it was really profound. The things that came out of my mouth were things I had literally not told anybody. So I was so fascinated with how easily the words streamed out of my mouth, and then after that, and the way the tears streamed down my face so easily, there was like no more filter there. And at the end of that session, I just softly fell asleep. It was like this purge, but not an intense, hard break through the protector parts. It was soft and gentle, and it was out. And that
Mm.
was a really important phase at that part in my life, to even just let it be heard by myself, let it be witnessed by myself, being witnessed by another person, which I think is one of the stages of healing that's really important.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And thanks for sharing that story. It's we get these stories from people here and there that are just extraordinary, like unfolding through,
Mhm.
one or two encounters. Then we have the inverse, right? Where it's like, oh, you've had 30 encounters and you haven't had that thing you're looking for yet. Um, we used to see it in holistic breath work. People were like, I just want that rebirth experience. I want to re-experience my birth. I'm like, why? Why is that the thing you want?
Yeah, yeah.
um,
I think
mm,
because there's this hierarchy of spirituality and power. Like, we all have this real fascination with power, and we think, well, if I have that experience, then I have access to a power that other people don't have, or it puts me in a
mm,
category separate than the rest of the world. And what do we think that that's going to bring us? Is it going to bring us safety? Is it going to bring us, you know, divine knowledge? Is it like, what is that? What is that we're wanting from that?
yeah, exactly. That makes sense. Um, yeah, reflecting on my own kind of uh, juvenile periods where I'm kind of seeking really hard, and like that was part of it. It's like this isn't a game I want, and it was kind
Mhm.
of like a spiritual bypass and a few other kind of ways of framing it, I'm sure. But yeah, like this is common, and it's
Mhm.
not. Yeah, don't judge yourself, folks, if you have that. Just
No, I think it's
learn
a
about it.
part of, yeah, yeah. I think there is a curiosity in us to, I think, Maslow expanded his hierarchy of needs to even include self-transcendence, and even in that, there's multiple layers in that too. Like, what are we seeking with that? So there may be this intrinsic desire to seek for more, and I think that's beautiful. It just is, then can we create a relationship with that seeking and see what is it actually wanting? With people who they want to have better sex, one of the questions that I ask them is, what is it that you're seeking in that better sex? What do you think you're going to get with that? And is it, and what do you mean by better sex too? A lot of times people are like, they just want more sex, but do they actually like the sex that they're having? Or for me, in the search of better sex, it was uh, peace. It was more of a fluidity and expression. It was Like I didn't want to be clenching anymore. I was clenching a lot in my body. And it was also power, certainly power, self-power in myself. And probably at some points, even using that, not even probably, I know in some points, feeling like if I had a sexual power, then I could use that in space that was valuable too. And so getting in relationship with that of like, oh, am I using this ability to be courageous in my body and in my expression, is that being used as a tool to seduce or to get something as well? And that's just as powerful or important for us. What is sex the function of? Like, what are we using it for? Is it to create safety? Is it to get resources? Is it to get connection, comfort, to feel something, to prove something? It oftentimes isn't even just an experience of pleasure and enjoyment. But if we don't get into the question of like, why am I using this? Or what is it? What's that relationship or function with it? We're not actually in power of it ourselves.
All right. So you're at the intersection of two really powerful topics. And a lot of people are like, oh, psychedelics can save the world. A lot of people are like, oh, good sex can save the world. And like, there's this kind of interesting intersection. I'm sure you see lots of assumptions that people have coming in that are super half baked, maybe is the kind way to put it. And then there's, what are kind of like some really half baked ideas that you see coming forward at the intersection of sex and psychedelics, and what kind of things do you actually see as like powerful things off in the horizon or that are here now?
Yeah. Like I said, many of us have this relationship with power, and in power, there's also the desire to want to be saved. So I see many of us looking to experts, authorities, doctors, not knowing that they have a part inside of them that really wants to be saved. Give me the answer. Take me out of this suffering. Get me out of this place that's really painful or dangerous for me. And when we say, this is the answer, psychedelics or sex, the conviction of that can feel very enticing to want to give up our power, our internal power for that person to do that for us. And that's very dangerous on many levels because the answer is never black and white and certain. And, we can't have conviction like that as much as we want that because it's so complex and the answer is really nuanced. And people have a hard time with nuance because it changes, it's dynamic, and the very nature of being human is dynamic. We change from morning to evening. We change from month to month, from year to year, through different phases of our life. And we can feel terrified when we're in, say, the ebb of something. Say our libido disappears and we're like, oh my God, I'm broken. There's something wrong with me. Or my dick isn't staying up. What's wrong with me, right? I'm not orgasming. And that also is not honoring that the body is in its own dynamic nature, speaking to us, communicating to us. This is a form of communication. It's a symptom. The nuance is, it really holds that. It holds space for us to both be valid in our experience and that the answer can be completely varied and complex. I do believe that both of these things can be highly supportive for us. In sex, I'll start with sex. The importance of sex when it comes to healing or when it comes to, power in ourselves is that there's so much cultural conditioning out there that tells us this is wrong, this is shameful, you shouldn't express this way, this is dangerous. There's messages even from the ancient times of making women's bodies and their erotic expression both as a ritual source and as more of a profane source wrong. That it's sinful, it's dirty, it's less than. And yet, what we know is that when an individual, I'm going to use a woman in this case because I just referred to that, when she's in her body and she's in her feeling and she's in her expression, that is such an incredibly powerful human being to behold. Because when you can feel, you can discern. And a discerning human is a very powerful human. So think about all the things that turn down our feeling. And that's a great way to both influence, control, to reduce somebody. So the same with psychedelics. What I love about psychedelics is that it can also connect us to that feeling. So for many of my clients who've had difficult time with, they've had trauma or they just have the impact of the cultural narrative on them, that feeling, the relationship with feeling can be very confusing. When they start to feel, whether it's an emotion or a sensation, they might go into the fear of feeling too much, overwhelm, or feeling too little, numbness, or nothing at all, or feeling incorrectly. And so psychedelics can help us to tap back into that feeling. What is it like when your body feels alive? What is it like when you feel energy? What is it like when you feel sensation and pleasure? MDMA is great for that. It's beautiful in that it can, I've had so many people report to me that they could feel emotion again, where they couldn't before they were really numb to it. Or my clients who've had vaginismus or dyspareunia, those are painful sex, they told me they used microdosing of psilocybin, and it helped to relax their body, helped to relax their vulva in a way that they could feel again and feel pleasure or enjoy just being in their body. Ketamine is another one. Like in my practice, in my retreats, like the women, I teach them how to move their body, how to get out of the head and into the body with that medicine. And I'll see them just like caressing themselves, like they're just touching their skin here, or they're moving their body, and I can tell that they're in the enjoyment of their body again in a way that doesn't overwhelm them and also doesn't numb them out. Now, the challenge with that is that psychedelics can also overwhelm you. They can also barge through the very important protector parts in our body that are designed to protect us, or to prevent that overwhelm, or us accessing something that we're not ready for. And so how the protocols that we're putting around that, safety we're putting around that, the preparation that we're putting around that is also incredibly important. There's even energetic practices that I'm seeing people teach nowadays where I disagree with some of the protocols that they're using because they're forcing too much energy through the body that the body's not prepared for. So that's where that can be dangerous. And I've worked with a number of individuals who came into my practice.
Can you name something that looks like that real quick?
I can. Yep. Yeah. Let's see. Gosh, I don't know the name of this other one, but I'll speak to this one. So this one's Kundalini activation process, CAP, not to be confused with ketamine-assisted therapy. But that one's one where I've received individuals after doing a class where there's several people and there's a facilitator, and their bodies weren't ready for that opening of the energetic flow of their body. And they ended up in a lot of pain, overwhelm, confusion, crying, and they couldn't calm their body down. And So we would do a session, and I can speak to this because this has happened several times. So it's a very general experience that I've seen, and having to work with them and bringing the energy down and bringing more of a self-containment again, where their teachers weren't available to talk, or they received the messages of you should just ground, or they gave them a list of things to do, but those actions weren't working because there's no preparation for a client, or even having a conversation with a client ahead of time, or a student who's coming to your class ahead of time, to see where they're at with their nervous system health, with their trauma history, with what may be happening in their field, to know whether they're prepared for that or not. Psychedelics do this too. It's like a psychedelic stimulates your nervous system, relaxes the fascia, which is the connective tissue in the body, so that the energy can flow so much easier. It's beautiful, and if it's not held correctly, it can be very disorienting, disrupting, activate psychotic breaks. And I fear that there's not enough infrastructure there to support people or give the resource to know who to go to, what to do. And then, I'll even speak back to the sex with all of that too. The dangerous side of all of that is also power, comes back to power. Like, who are we working with? There's an inherent power dynamic, or with anybody that we're seeking help from. And many facilitators don't realize that, or it's very seductive to be in a role of power and to be the one that's facilitating and offering this healing for somebody. And sometimes they don't even know what stuff of theirs is becoming transferred onto a client, or onto somebody that they're working on. And so their stuff can end up in the space, and they can project their needs onto another client. Therapists do that too. I'm not just saying it's psychedelic facilitators, but coaches do it too. I just think it's really good hygienic practice for us to be doing that work, to see what we're bringing into the space as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I was just chatting with a Norwegian psychotherapist researcher who's talking more and more about doing the research required such that therapists can actually have their own processes legally with MDMA and other substances, such that they have more awareness and more skill in session, right? And
yeah,
that's a hard thing to sell sometimes, but I think psychotherapy as a field kind of understands that there are limitations, and there are things that we got to catch.
We do, and there is even talk about, I'll tie it back to sex, erotic transference and countertransference, which means that what we project onto our clients, or our clients project onto us in an erotic sense, can be both used as a tool and used as harm if it's moving unconsciously through it. So one of the things that I suggest people, and that I do personally, is working in cohorts. Working in cohorts, or working with your own therapist, I have clients who are therapists, and we do their work that shows up in their client sessions, because that's really important, to have a place where your stuff is in there. We can't pretend like it's not. But how do we do that hygiene practice to make sure that we're consciously aware of it, and we have a relationship with it, so it's not unconsciously ruling what's happening in our sessions with our clients?
Muted. Sorry, everybody.
You know what? Much of the country is and the world is muted, so.
I'll give you a little bit of personal trivia, Kat. I have a kind of thing where I actually show up as a mime, but it's actually the world's worst mime, who's actually a clown. So there's like a, there's a whole lot of stuff there. We'll get into that later, but the muting is part of it.
Yeah.
um, I've not been punched yet, but
Oh, thank
it's not
God.
always it's not always the most well looked upon thing. Um, yeah. So the world being muted. Yeah, so this like hygiene thing is really important. This like self-awareness of power dynamics is super important. I don't know that we're ever gonna kind of solve it. I just think it's an active part of humanity and how we're always gonna kind of interact with each other.
Yeah.
Um, but we gotta, watch it, become more self-aware, can help us in kind of like hopefully seeing the dynamics that could suck us into something like a high control group,
Hmm.
which is, I uh, I don't want to name any right now, but there's a handful out there, um, some of whom have been busted up, some are still active. But these dynamics, these erotic kind of things, or the power dynamic things, can always kind of like be things that attract us. But once we all kind of become more aware of that,
Hmm.
kind of a little bit metacognitive, maybe we
Hmm.
can kind of protect ourselves and each other. What do you think?
You know what? I had once had this really awesome therapist years ago who asked me, "Are you aware of what parts of you are getting their needs met through being a therapist?" And I was like, "Oh, that's a good question." Because it's funny, we choose these careers or we choose these things, and if we're not aware of what parts of us originally picked it, um, then I don't think we're in the power of it. We're not in the power seat of it. And that isn't to say that there can't be also a connection of altruism and desire to help people. Um, but there may also be another part in there too, and not to shame that part either. It's just like, oh, I'm very aware. There's a part of me that's whether it's feeling power in this role of knowledge and helping somebody, or if this I'm getting the attention with somebody who's their undivided attention on me that I didn't get when I was younger, or um, I get to intellectually get off on analyzing somebody,
Mm-hmm.
and just so yeah, it's things like that. The nuance, there's the nuance thing there. It's not direct. It's um, energetic. It's subtle. It's flexible, dynamic.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the power and like being in the power after you get
Hmm.
some letters after your name and a license. Like that's a
Hmm.
really interesting shift from
Hmm.
like you're not one of the select elite until you have
Hmm.
these.
Yeah.
I've had that kind of I chose not to go to therapy school. I thought about it long and hard for a long
Yeah.
time and I just like decided I don't know that that's for me. But,
Hmm.
I've experienced the Joe, you're not a therapist thing a lot.
Hmm.
And I'm like, fascinating.
Oh, I hate that. Yeah, yeah, that's really unfortunate because
Hmm.
I think that that prevents us all from working together in a multidimensional way where somebody's eyes and voice and particular way of understanding or seeing something or their discipline can pick up something that I can't, and then I can work with them on that, and we can we can solve some of these problems and some of these puzzles together. It's kind of like looking at the archaeologists, and when they started working with the geologists, they started uncovering even more and more quickly the mysteries of our ancient time because archaeologists don't necessarily know the science of the rocks and the minerals, and so it's just yeah, there's space for all of us to work together.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for that. And I um want to kind of pivot. Um I had something really good. Okay, here it is. I think I got it again. So, people hear this kind of, oh, sex and psychedelics, or like, oh, Burning Man, Orgy Dome, everybody's gonna get super high on acid or MDMA and everybody's having sex with everybody. And it's like, that's not exactly what we're talking about. And I think that's kind of one of the intellectual traps when we start thinking about this, as
Hmm.
opposed to like what can it unveil, or what
Hmm.
could it open up for possibility wise, for people, as in like greater intimacy or all of those. Like you've had some really good lists earlier of like what people might be looking for, and I think
Yeah.
it's still the same list roughly speaking for the general sex conversation. There might, though, be some access to things via Tantra that are kind of beyond that list, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
Did I trigger anything you want to go off on there?
Yeah, a lot of things.
Great.
So we can start with, um, actually, I can probably answer them both at the same time. So I'm working on a model to help people to understand that erotic evolution can happen on a couple of different levels across many different categories. So it can start with awareness as the first step, becoming aware of the cognitive constructs, the definitions, how we're identifying ourselves. And then it can move into intelligence when we apply what the awareness is, and we gain more of a interaction with these definitions or these roles or these energetics or these emotions. Like, how do emotions affect our eroticism and sex? And then at the peak of that is acuity, mastery. And that's where you might study deep into sacred sexuality in Tantra, or become a master in BDSM, and what does that even mean? And that can, to me, or the fluidity of roles. And to me, when I think of the mastery, it's like the full integration and spontaneous flow of creativity, of our embodiment of these roles that you might see of leadership, follower, masculine, feminine, receptive, initiator, where you're not thinking about it, you're just fully in the dance of it. So I like to parse it out like that. You can go into sexual evolution and be at any one of those points, and it's beautiful. It's one of those three is even better than just being unconscious, which so many of us are unconsciously driven by the programs and the schemas in the world that the world's provided to us. Now, many people might be, or people might be afraid to go into sex and psychedelics because of those images that you just presented. I also believe that people are afraid to go into this. I guess this likens to that, because what if they go overboard? What if they like it too much? What if they lose themselves to chaos and orgies and body parts everywhere, and it's insatiable? And I've heard that from the narratives of women that I've worked with. They're afraid to get into their sexuality, or they're afraid to go to play parties, or they're afraid to make out with women because they're afraid they're going to like it too much, and that they'll be that they'll burn up and burn out. And with that, I really believe that I am a great embodiment of the feral archetype. Meaning, like, I have rewilded myself, and I love being expressively perverted, and I love to say sexual innuendos and sex jokes, and I love the play of that. And I love being wild. I love wearing my underwear around the house and just doing, whatever the fuck I want. And but with that, I don't burn out because I've built such a strong containment of myself. And so the development of the skills to be chaos is only as supportive and growth inducing as we have a strong container. And I'm meaning this for ourselves, because in the cultural dialogue, I hear a lot of this, like, feminine needs a good, strong masculine, or a woman can be fully expressed when she has a man that has, can hold her in that, in all of her rage and chaos and all that stuff. And the challenge with that narrative is that when we don't develop these for ourselves, we might be outsourcing these skills to somebody else. And then what is our discernment of that person that we're asking to be that role for us? And that's where it becomes very tricky. I taught this class called Fem Chaos to women who were sugar babies, and they were really wanting to find their power in their eroticism and their sexuality. And so these questions were, when you build containment of yourself, that is things like presence, self-regulation, um, uh, consent, negotiation, advocacy, direct communication, directness, that builds a sense of intrinsic safety for yourself. And if you don't have that, you might be looking for somebody to provide these things for you. And this is unconscious. Like you can consciously say, hey, can you pay for my things? And it's totally, totally okay. But when you're unconsciously wanting somebody else to fill those holes for you or hold that for you, so we can be in full chaos and expression and all over the place, that we might not realize what we're paying out of our power, out of our safety, out of our anything else that we might be giving up. We do this, many of us do this all the time. We're just not aware of it. But on the flip side of that, the chaos is full expression. How do we teach ourselves to be in our fullest expression? And the world may not meet us there. There are many times where I've said something pervy or sexual and did not land. Did not land. And I've also built the ability to not collapse in that. I'm like, whoop. Usually I'll say something like, whoop, that did not land. Tell me how that translated for you,
Mm-hmm.
But because I have that strong container of myself, I don't need to collapse or fall apart in that. It's taking time, but those are the skills I think can be helpful. So then we can go to an orgy and be able to say no when we don't want something, or we can go to a sexual healing, tantric, shamanic retreat to learn skills. And because the facilitator is in a role to teach us, we might say override our yes, or override our no to say yes for the sake of healing, but that actually doesn't do it. And it hurts us even more because we don't have that sense of self-containment for ourselves to be able to say no or believe we can.
I'm going to pull up a picture that I took yesterday.
Oh,
it's relevant here.
Okay. Well, I wonder how relevant. Whew. Yes. Yeah. Oh my
That's
God.
So
says stay feral with a, what is that, a possum?
Yeah, with a bow on the head.
Like
yeah, I've been like kind of like leaning into the term feral a lot lately. As like, I don't know, it seems like there is something kind of fundamentally broken about the cultural container we're in. I don't know if it's fundamental, but it appears to be part of the fabric of how everybody's showing up. They're mediated through this kind of cultural container that doesn't allow people to be wild.
Yeah.
To be feral. I like the term feral mystic a lot. Been kind of like working on that one a little bit. It's like, what is that?
And then, what is that? Tell me.
Well, there's some in what you said there that kind of like flows right into it. It's like, who is the authority I'm going to bend a knee to or like take a knee to? It's, it's not Elon. It's not the orange guy. And it's like, not like, there's not, I can't see too many things that I would want to take a knee to, I think taking a knee to your own divinity is the thing. And that is the kind of essence of the feral mystic. It's like, I'm the thing. We're the thing.
Yeah. Yeah. The word feral comes from moving from a domestic state to a rewilding state. And I think that is a really powerful word to stand behind as we're rewilding again. But again, it comes back to what I said earlier. There's power in feeling. There's power in feeling because we learn the communication of our body, and then that is our authentic self-authority, and that's really powerful. While there is a part of me that has a lot of concern around what's happening in the bigger culture at large, there's a part of me that has a deep belief in teaching people to feel again, teaching people to come back in right relationship with their body, so that power comes from from the ground up instead of the top down from the people that are necessarily in our leaderships. And so that's what I believe. That I feel really strongly for that.
Hmm. Yeah, we've been abstracted from all power sources, and I think like figuring out where those are for us, and it's like self ownership,
Yeah.
in a lot of ways. And
Hmm.
there's a sign at, I guess here we go. There's a sign when I was driving by DPW one day, and it was just like no masters, and there's a giant guillotine. I'm like, oh boy, you guys are living living pretty indifferent.
Oh my
And I'm
god.
like, oh my god.
Wow.
And
Mhm.
yeah, and then one of my friends' camps, Hush Hush Pony Barn, they actually had like a whole guillotine like gag that you actually would work through, and you kind of like
Mhm. Mm.
get your head chopped off. I'm like, oh my god, this is
Mhm.
really a cultural moment right now, but also like taking your own power back in a certain way, symbolically or otherwise. Like I think is really important because as empires collapse, like the people are still there.
Mhm.
People survive
Me
collapse
too.
of you know
Mhm.
Europe did okay after the collapse of the Roman Empire, kind of took a little bit, but
Mhm.
they did it.
Yeah, or it
um
evolved. Like all these
mhm,
places, and that's something that we need to remember is the constant evolution of the world, the mixing of cultures, the inspiration, the melting pot that eventually happens across the globe, and the ebbs, flows, shifts, like it. Yeah, I'm watching that. The cycles, the repetition of cycles for a millennia. Like a lot of this is not really even new. It's just a repeated cycle. We've heard these stories again. Um, there's a lot of people that are going back into the remembrance of ancient times and history. It's really powerful to hear people talk about that. Uh, it's also really important with that we check the interpretations because there's also a lot of misinterpretations of these things too. And um, the power of mythology, I guess, is important to um, use to have our own individual interpretations. So it can be that too. How much are we going to know the actual truth of things? So maybe there is space for the interpretation. I think that's just as important.
mhm. Yeah, absolutely. There's so much room for play in a lot of these areas. Speaking of play, um
Oh, I don't do that.
so there's
Just kidding.
I was at this great talk last night about like bringing more play into therapy and making therapy feel like improv, and play can be really convivial or deadly serious. And Burning Man's an example of that. You get the little rubber chickens everywhere,
Mhm.
or people are playing with their lives, and it says on the ticket you can die. So
Mhm.
there's uh it's fascinating, and I see this kind of like play engine
Mhm.
as, I think, one of our larger opportunities for cultural transformation. How do you like to sit with this kind of concept?
Oh, I am the queen of play.
Mm, mm,
I love play. I've done a lot of research around play and try to keep a pulse on what new comes out around play. Stuart Brown does a lot of research around the concept of play and really helps to define it for us. And it's when we intrinsically are drawn to start doing something. There's no end goal or achievement, a desired outcome per se. It's more for the desire to do the thing. We're not in the self consciousness around doing it right or wrong, and we lose ourselves to it. So, flow state, like we lose ourselves to the time, or we lose track of time in that. And we all have different ways of playing. There are some of us are more kinesthetic. Some of us are more like we like collecting things, and that's a form of play. Some of us like competition. Some of us play in being a director role. Some of us play in creation of art, and some of us have play through research. I will spend hours researching something, and it's so much fun for me. Love it. I literally drool for doing it, and I believe that that's really important for us too, because many people or the concept of play in society has a lesser priority than, say, something with achievement or something that we produce or something, and yet play rejuvenates us with energy. Play also requires us to be so present with the things that are available to us. Improv is an excellent example. We are present to what's here, and we use what's here. Improving dinner, cooking dinner. You go to your kitchen, you go open your refrigerator. What do I have to engage with, to participate with? And when we play, there's the opportunity of trying something on. We don't know if it's going to work out, and that's not the point, and it doesn't matter. We're experimenting. It also allows us to, where was I going with that? Engage with things that might otherwise be incredibly vulnerable. Think about sex. I instruct people to do play labs where they go into like 30 minutes with their partner. They bring in whatever they want, a specific position or a toy or an activity. And for 30 minutes, they're playing, they're experimenting, they're trying it out. They're doing different things, seeing what happens. And then on the other side of that, they process, they talk. What worked? What did they like? What didn't they like? And now we're not attaching our personal value to whether something didn't work. I want to use this butt plug. I don't know if it's going to work, but let's try it out. That way I'm not a failure to my partner. I'm not a failure to myself because we did that. And then when we're talking about this on more of the cultural level, Burning Man is an excellent example of play, of bringing in the guillotines, of bringing in the perverted signs of, I make these really unhinged street signs that, it'll be like a stop sign, and I'll write nonstop anal on it, or don't stop daddy, or I had one this year that I put rhinestones on it, and it's originally said parking in rear, and I put parking in her rear. And I was just jumping around with those, passing them out to people, letting people play with it. And it allows us the ability to engage with sex, with pervertedness in a fun way. We're engaging with it. I'm not taking it on as any end goal except the joy of it. And people get to test their feelings around it, or what comes up for them, or how do they feel when they're holding that. They feel taboo. This is naughty. Oh my God, I'm holding this fucking sign. It's really unhinged. And I'm doing it. And it's, how does it feel for me? Burning Man, coming back to what you said, these things, there's so many of these unhinged things that are said. And there are times where I've taken things out and I'm like, oh my God, how are people going to respond to this? And Burning Man is a great place to try this part of us out. Somebody might have offense to it, and we can be with that. And again, do we collapse? Do we go into over explaining, or do we just allow somebody to have a different perspective? They don't understand me, and the discomfort of somebody not understanding me is a really great lesson we all get to learn.
Yeah. Yeah, it is an interesting place. How do you, 30 seconds or less, what is Burning Man to you? How do we, how do you like to talk about Burning Man? I kind of don't know that I like talking about Burning Man other than telling people not to go.
Mhm.
Um, like, and
Oh my
making
god.
jokes like Burning Man's ruined my life and stuff like that. Where I'm like, on one hand, super serious, on the other hand, total joke. And it's like, what else can I think about now? Now that I've done
Yeah.
this weird thing and engaged in it too much.
Yeah.
Um,
It depends on who I'm talking to.
yeah.
On Instagram, I've gone for 10 years in a row, including the Renegade Burn, and I talk about what I get out of the experience every time, because to me, it's like a ceremonial experience. I go in there with an intention, and then I meet whatever experience happens there. And
Hmm.
after that, I'm journaling a lot and processing, because there's lessons I learned, there's skills I learned, there's ways I showed up that might be different than what I've done before. I always do a different experience. I even one year camped completely solo in my own tent with my own AC unit, and tried that. And I met the part of me that was self reliant and could go out into the world and make friends and make joy and fun everywhere with every situation. I didn't stop smiling the whole time. And that was really important for me to learn. Another year, it was my dad had just died, and I went out there and shit hit the fan everywhere. And it was the hardest burn. I was also solo camping by myself because I tried to repeat the year before. And what was powerful was to see all these dads come forward and help me in each of these situations. So there was something really important for me to learn, like the surrender into help. And as radical reliant as I felt that I was in the year before, this one was, I need help. I need to be held. Um, there was one year I'd been studying a lot around the Eleusinian mysteries, and Brian Marasco's work is one of them, the author of The Immortality Key. And what I saw was Burning Man as a sense of Eleusinian mystery, as in you take a journey, and follow me with this, but you take a journey and it may be hard, and you arrive at this place where this container of ecstatic states, mystery, uh, drugs, psychedelics, meeting other people, expanded consciousness, spontaneous playa providing you with something that you manifested or you were wanting, and and so I saw it from more of like a mystical sense uh, in that year. And so every year it's something new and different. I think it's just a container, if you want to treat it as such, for evolution, personal evolution, or you can treat it, it's like the sacred and profane. It can be something that's really sacred. It can also be profanity. And it can be the combination of both of those, where sacredness can be found in profanity. The divinity and the humanness. When I'm saying sacred and profane, I'm referring to the humanness of that. And both of them can exist at the same exact time.
Hmm. Yeah. There's so much there in this like weird cultural experiment, and there's the best and worst of humanity
Mm-hmm.
there. Everybody brings their best and worst to Burning Man.
Yep.
And it's like, I, I've learned so much. I've only gone 4 in a row.
Mm-hmm.
I, made a ridiculous decision to bring an art car second year. And
And you
it's been,
learned.
learned a lot. And,
Uh-huh.
yeah, it's fascinating. And there's so much education that can happen there, self-knowledge. You're like, oh,
Yeah.
and hopefully you have people to help you kind of
Mm-hmm.
learn from it
Mm-hmm.
too. Like,
Yeah.
oh, how did I show up super fucked up here?
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you for telling me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also think it's such a microcosm of the macro world. As much as it wants to be, it has this desire to be non central government that's created. As much as it wants to be free from judgment and like a fluidity of a mix of people, there's judgment, there's darkness, there's curmudgeonness, there's crustiness, there's you can't do this thing because you have money, and you can't plug and play, you can't do this. Like, that's exactly what the rest of the world is looking like. So I also don't see anything wrong with that either. It's just a mirror. Like, this is what happens when you grow a society. to be as big as it is? Does it turn up emulating the world that we're trying to not be like? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think about like pop media's kind of presentation of it in the last couple of years, where it's like the focus is on orgydom only? It seems like it's like,
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
mirror and a half. It's like
Yeah.
that's all you know about, and
Yeah.
that's interesting.
Yeah. People like sensationalism. People want entertainment. They want to hear that there was cannibalism at Burning Man and Ebola, broke out in
Yeah.
Mudburn, like, because, and here's the thing is like media as entertainment brings feeling into the body. It's sensation, it's panic, it's anxiety, it's fear, it's like all these feelings where our everyday life might be really mundane. We might be numb to every day. We might be. So how many of us are reading the news, in this case, Burning Man, for the excitement? Oh my God, that happened. Wow, I can't even believe there's an orgy dome where people have sex next to each other. Like, what? So I kind of laugh at it. I'm like, I remember after Mudburn, walking out, 2 miles and just being super joyful and going into the what do you call that, the casinos, to clean up and rest finally, because I was exhausted, and feeling I was in a totally different dimension walking through the casino floor. And people, I look grungy, I look totally dirty, totally smelly, and people are like, you're coming from Burning Man, did you get that Ebola? And I'm like, huh? Yeah, I can't. I can't handle this right now. No, I did not. But it's interesting. But they're like, it's exciting for the world, and yeah, we're looking for entertainment. We're looking for life. We're looking for, here's the coming back to eroticism, the word eroticism, aliveness. And so are we finding aliveness in these shocking, sensationalized news? Yeah, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Or do we want to come into the vulnerable feeling aspect of pleasure? But most people don't want that because that takes time.
Right. Right. Yeah, there's so much here to dig into. So we're at, roughly speaking, time. We don't need to hurry, but I want to, respect your day, and like, what are some maybe kind of gems or things we didn't hit that you might want to leave folks with as we kind of work towards the end here?
Mm. Oh, here's something I shared with you before we started recording. So I had been, for the last 8-9 months, I've been dealing with long COVID symptoms that activated my Epstein-Barr, activated old mold poisoning that I had a couple years ago. And it's left me for the 8 months dealing with chronic fatigue, foggy brain, pain in my body, like waking up and having pain in my body. Like the inflammation markers were through the roof, and it tanked my hormones, and it tanked my cortisol levels, and it just brought the worst out of the physical body. And I think so many people are struggling with this, and they don't know what they can do as it relates to their sex life. Like right now, I'm working with amazing functional doctors who have me, doing ozone and hormone therapy, and working with inflammation, glutathione, things like that. However, during this process, it was the greatest lesson for me of how do you stay erotic? How do you continue to nurture your sex life with yourself and with your partner amid chronic illness, chronic pain, chronic fatigue? And the solution of that is coming into a relationship with pleasure. And I'm going to explain that more versus just what's regurgitated on social media. Pleasure is really important. Pleasure is that the feel good sensation in our body, when we can relax our nervous system to connect with it. In therapy, I teach this very basic practice called glimmers and glows. This is a somatic practice that when we stop and we can consciously connect with something in our environment that might feel good, and a feel good for people who haven't had pleasure in their bodies or don't have those reference points, is this subtle expansion of the body. We shift into the parasympathetic system, and things open a little bit. I have birds outside. I leave my windows open. I hear the birds outside, and I'll just stop for a moment and hear the birds, and I feel my body shift into that parasympathetic state, and it feels nice. Now, that's a glimmer. And if you stay connected with that 30 seconds to a minute even, it shifts into what's called a glow. And it expands and deepens that regulated state, and it expands the threshold of what you can tolerate. So pleasure is very important for the health of our nervous system, just on a basic level. It's not really basic, but on that foundational level. Now, when we're chronically fatigued, when we're in pain, a lot of times we don't want to be in the body because that's where the source of this is. And yet, you can connect with pleasure through just your breath. Like if everybody just pauses and takes a slow breath in and a slow breath out, there's something pleasurable about doing that. Or if you walk outside, I do this practice. I live in the mountains, and I'll go out for a walk and just be in tune with the sensations, the birds, the wind, the sound of the trees, the wind going through the trees, the feeling of my feet on the earth, or my bare feet on the earth. And that increases your sensitivity, relaxes the body, especially if there's any clenching going on in the body because of pain or fatigue. And you can see the whole body have a state change. It may not get rid of the pain, but you're developing a relationship with the body still. Or when you're engaging with your partner, bringing in the presence, bringing in the slowness, connecting to what feels good, and acknowledging where you're at. There were times where I told my partner, I don't want penetration, or I don't want to orgasm. I even said, I don't want to orgasm, because it took a lot of energy in that moment, and I didn't have any. So allowing ourselves to fall into like a melted state of just touching and breathing and enjoying each other. And sometimes that would open up to more, and sometimes it wouldn't. But that continual coming back to things like that, while also honoring where the end point actually is, where the limit actually is, prevented me from going into a 0 to 100 pattern of nothing at all or all the way, which so many people do. If they start flirting, this is going to go to penetration, and I don't want that, so I'm not going to flirt at all. Or if I start making out with them, that's going to go to penetration. I don't want that, so I'm just not going to make out at all. I'm just going to push their hand off of me. And that's unfortunate, because we're losing all of these other realms that we might actually be available for, or can even contribute to both our healing of the physical body as well as the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'll tell people. Like, just because there's pain, just because you're sick, or just because you're in this state, doesn't mean all of that's not available to you. And you can start with small things, and that's actually incredibly profound.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It moves the door, the perceived realm of possibility, and a lot of other things. And actually getting pleasure is just medical. So
it is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And if you need psychedelic help, like that might be available for you too. Ketamine is an analgesic. It's, prevents pain. It helps with some of the pain. So, or it helps lift the heaviness of depression and anxiety, so that you can feel connect and pleasure again. Or, so you can be in your body more easily too.
Mm. So where can people find out more about your private practice and workshops and other things you have going on?
Yeah, so they can go to drkatmeyer.com. That's drcatmeyer.com. They can also find me on Instagram at the same name. And my podcast is Sex, Love, Psychedelics on Spotify and iTunes and all those podcasty things.
Outstanding. Amazing. Well, Dr. Kai Myers has been lovely. Thank you so much. I hope we get to do more. We had a lovely conversation a while ago about the history of a lot of this stuff, and
Yeah.
it'd be fun to dig into that in the future if you're up for it.
Oh God, let's do it. Let's be nerds and dig deep into the past. Yeah.
Love it. Well, thank you so much, and until next time, appreciate it.
Thank you.